I used to feel my life being slowly rearranged around one magnet: sex, an erotic gravity that pulled every plan, every conversation, every idle minute into its orbit. It was like someone had shifted the compass of my soul so that the needle no longer pointed to north, but to appetite. And the more I let it happen, the more the world turned flat, like a map without mountains. Have you ever felt your deepest energy diverted into something powerful, yet strangely off-center, as if you were worshipping the heat of the fire instead of the hearth it was meant to warm? This is the call I want to answer today, the call to notice where our vital energy truly belongs. And to tell this, I need Parsifal, the young fool of the Grail myth, because his naivete and eventual awakening trace the exact path from distraction to center. In my own life, I realized I had accepted a hidden philosophy, that the purpose of life could be simplified to attraction, conquest, replication, the Darwinian drumbeat distilled into a private soundtrack. Don't get me wrong, evolution tells an undeniable story about bodies, but I made a mistake that cost me the most precious thing in existence, a lived connection to my inner center. I let a strong force pretend to be the central one. Psychologically, that is how we lose ourselves, by confusing the loudest impulse with the truest orientation. Parsifal begins as I began. Impulsive, guided by surface energies, dazzled by armor and bright plumage, mistaking noise for meaning. This is the call to adventure, an intuition that there is a deeper kingdom, an invisible court where something holy waits. For me, the call came as a subtle dissatisfaction even in moments of victory. The pursuit would flare, I'd catch the prize, and a hollow echo remained. The promise was never the fulfillment. It was as if the feast always turned to ash just as it touched my tongue. That was the call, the quiet knowing that I was starving at a table of abundance. Then comes the refusal of the call. I rationalized it. I wrapped my life in stories borrowed from science misapplied to spirit. It's only natural. Don't fight nature. This is what we're built for. I used Darwin as a talisman to ward off self-inquiry, misunderstanding him as a prophet of meaning rather than a describer of mechanisms. Carl Jung once pointed out that what we call libido isn't just sexual energy, but psychic energy writ large, the living current of the soul. I had flattened that current into one dimension, confusing a river for a canal. Ken Wilber warned about this flatland too, the reduction of the many dimensions of reality to a single plane, as if depth could be erased without cost. I refused the call by clinging to a single lens. It felt safe. It made life simple, but it made me small. Crossing the threshold happened the day I asked a dangerous question. What if this powerful force is not the center, but a servant of the center? Have you noticed how desire promises union, yet often delivers fragmentation? Bits of attention scattered across tabs and memories, like broken stained glass. I realized I was confusing eros for erotics. Wilbur speaks of eros as the drive of the universe toward greater wholeness and complexity, the upward thrust of evolution, while sex is one local expression of that cosmic current. I had reduced the ocean to a teacup. The threshold was admitting that my vitality wants to ascend and expand, not just discharge. Once inside the forest of the unknown, Parsifal faces tests, and so did I. The first was attention. Attention is the knight's horse. If it bolts at every rustle, you go nowhere. I trained it with simple practices: breath, stillness, walking without the phone, small reins to guide the animal home. The second test was meaning. I had to ask, what is my grail? Not what is immediately gratifying, not what culture flashes as victory, but the chalice that holds the core of my life. I wrote it down. I gave it words. And then I noticed how quickly the old habits tried to retake the castle. That's when Kundry appears, the tempter in the Grail saga, the shimmering promise of immediate warmth that steals you from the fire of your purpose. I'm not shaming desire. I'm naming its distortion when it replaces the center. Jung would say, this is the shadow wearing perfume. Whatever we won't integrate seduces us, and when seduction fails, it shames us. Both keep us orbiting the wrong star. There was a deeper trial, learning to sublimate without suppression. Suppression is a locked cellar. Sublimation is a cathedral that raises the same stones into an arch. The energy didn't need to be killed. It needed to be crowned. I began to guide it toward creation. Lines on a page, projects with soul, conversations that risked honesty, and the quiet bravery of service. Each act felt like laying a brick on the path toward the Grail castle. But the myth says there's always an abyss. Mine arrived as a night of doubt. If the world truly is nothing but blind selection and mating strategies dressed in poetry, am I not just painting a mask over machinery? The wasteland opened inside me, just like the Fisher King's kingdom. Sterile because the king is wounded in the place of generation. Here is Jung again. When the center is displaced, the whole psyche becomes a desert. And here is Wilbur. Confusing pre-rational impulses with trans-rational wisdom is the tragic pre-trans fallacy. I had been bouncing between them, either worshipping impulse or scorning it, never integrating it into something higher. In the Grail Hall, Parsifal's first failure is silence. He sees the suffering king and does not ask the healing question. I realized my version of silence was avoiding the question, what do you serve? Not what excites you, not what distracts you. What is worthy of your life? So I asked, and like Parsifal returning wiser, I finally spoke. Whom does the Grail serve? The answer came as stillness that felt like warm light. The center serves the self. In Jung's sense, not the ego's throne, but the organizing wholeness of the psyche, the image of God within. When I placed sex back in its rightful orbit, as a powerful energy with a noble role, but not the sun, all the planets of my life began to align. Paradoxically, desire became cleaner, less frantic, more luminous, almost devotional. The encounter with the selfie is not fireworks, but a hush, illumination that rests like snowfall that makes the city silent. Peace doesn't mean an absence of heat. It means the hearth is finally in the center of the home. Have you ever tasted that peace, even for a minute, the kind that makes noise step back and space open around your heart? That was my return. I brought back not a rule book, but a reorientation. Specifically, I now treat my vitality as a lit flame that deserves a lamp. I ask daily, how will this energy serve the Grail? I practice honest naming of temptations without self-loathing. It robs them of their spell. I design my environment to point me toward creation before consumption, morning pages before messages, walking before scrolling, stillness before spectacle. And when desire surges, I hold it in the chalice of breath so it can rise, not spill. Nietzsche once hinted that to give style to one's character is art, not repression, not abandonment, but form. I give form to energy by giving it a place within a larger story, and that story is not flatland. It's a vertical journey with depth, with a castle in the heart. The Darwinian account remains true for bodies in time. It explains mechanics, but meaning belongs to the Grail. The precious thing we lose when we enthrone erotics as ultimate is not morality, it's orientation. We forget where home is. The psyche becomes a traveler who camps forever at way stations, mistaking the warmth of the campfire for the destiny of the pilgrimage. The Grail myth reminds us the castle is real, and the king can be healed, but only when we remember to ask the right question and serve the right center. In Jungian terms, this is individuation, the scattered fragments of the self becoming a living mandala, with the self at the axis. In Wilbur's language, it's the movement from translation to transformation. We stop merely rearranging furniture in the same small room and instead find the staircase to a wider floor. And the peace that arises is not sterile. It is fecund, like rain on a wasteland that suddenly remembers how to green. Parsifal shows me that innocence is not the end. Integrated wisdom is. The fool becomes a knight not by killing desire, but by kneeling it before the Grail. The sword still gleams, the body still sings, but both belong to a higher order. When the center holds, desire becomes a river that irrigates the kingdom instead of a flood that drowns it. What would happen if, just for this week, you treated your energy as royal and asked every morning, whom does it serve? Where would your attention ride if you saddled it to purpose instead of novelty? If anything in you is tired of flatness, consider this your trumpet from the forest edge. The castle is near. Enter with a question, and you may leave with a center. I'll end simply. May your life warm at the hearth, not burn at the edges. Tell me in the comments how you've wrestled with this, where your energy gets hijacked, and what practices help you return to center. Reflection by Felipe Brando.